Well, good morning, y'all, and thanks for tuning in. I'm Jordan Green, and you're watching On Track, a weekly look at the biggest news in railroading. So, we've been watching a great deal of innovation in the railroad industry right now. Between the implementation of precision scheduled railroading, positive train control, and new lightweight rail cars, the industry is seeing a series of technological advances not thought of in decades. Soon, that innovation could actually reach the engine bay of locomotives. So, for about 2 years, Wabtec has been exploring battery powered locomotives, and the company has finally produced enough to strike up a deal with railroads like Union Pacific to sell several into service, according to a news release by Union Pacific. The railroad has purchased 20 of Wabtec's battery electric engines to put in a yard service in Omaha, Nebraska, and Los Angeles. So let's take a look at kind of what these look like right now. We've got an example here from Union Pacific's website. Looking at these locomotives, what's interesting about them is, of course, they have the typical GE safety cab feature that came about several years ago, but on the back, which isn't clearly visible here, they kind of have an EMD type locomotive rear end. So it's an interesting kind of a genesis between the two locomotives. So the railroad is spending about $100 million purchasing just 20 of these engines, along with the infrastructure upgrades they need to get them into service. That's no small chunk of change, even for one of the nation's largest companies. The railroad, according to a news release, intends to test the locomotives in yard service before sending them out on long freight hauls. Here's what Union Pacific CEO Lance Fritz had to say. We're committed to actions that reduce Union Pacific's environmental footprint as we work toward our ultimate goal of reaching net zero emissions by 2050. These investments will contribute to further developing this important technology and providing industry-wide benefits. Now, of course, how well these locomotives would ever do in freight service depends on how much pulling power they actually have and, most importantly, how long their battery life is. That remains to be seen, but Wabtec sales representatives say the locomotives can go hundreds of miles without recharging, according to the company's website. That's not a bad starting point, but to be feasible for freight service, these locomotives are going to have to last more than a few hundred miles without recharging. Charging time is also going to be critical, as the locomotives need to be able to take on power quickly and get back on the rails. If freight trains are being delayed more than they already are because battery-powered locomotives are having to recharge, that's neither feasible nor practical. Diesel engines may take several minutes to get a full tank of fuel, but charging a battery fully takes a lot longer. We'll see how this idea works out in practice, but we can rest assured that battery technology will improve over time, just as it has with cell phones, vehicles, and virtually any other kind of movable battery source. What's interesting, though, with this is that railroads would even pursue battery power in the first place. Rail transportation is arguably already the most cost-efficient, fuel-efficient form of transportation in the country, really in the world. Railroads are already the greenest form of transportation available because diesel engines can pull more freight using less fuel than trucks. Railroads hope to reduce their fuel costs by switching to electric, but they need to realize that electric costs are also continuing to rise. And in the event that power outages occur, dead locomotives could be stranded if the railroad doesn't have generators in the area to recharge batteries. And let's remember, too, that batteries are more environmentally harmful than diesel. When batteries go bad, they're considered biohazard material. So what happens when these batteries need to be retired and replaced after several years? Railroads could potentially have a major issue on their hands. So while innovation in the industry is a must, railroads would be wise to consider that battery electric engines pose problems of their own. Just because they run on electrical currents and not diesel power doesn't mean they're the wave of the future. Thanks for tuning in to On Track. I appreciate your viewership, and I hope you enjoy our segment. Don't forget to follow us on YouTube at NWTV7, and you can also find us here on Twitch. Again, thanks for tuning in to On Track. Let's get back on the rails. I'm Jordan Green.